Hello to my dear students and friends. We're going to start a session on the economic impact of the Russia-Ukraine war on Indian economy or on India. So this is a topic which is very much in demand and very much in news these days, because directly we are not involved in the war. Our soldiers are not there. Our students are stuck there, so that is a issue. But apart from that, it is largely the economy which is the issue. So let us look at what would be the economic impact. Before we can discuss the economic impact of the war on India, let us very briefly look at the position of Russia and Ukraine in the global trade. And then only we can come to India specifically. So first of all, what do they really export? What are their biggest exports? So if we look at Russia, the biggest export of Russia is oil and natural gas. Russia is one of the biggest exporter of the natural gas. And it is also one of the large exporter of oil. As per one estimate, Russia is accounting for almost 11 to 12% of the global oil supply. And in Russian exports, oil and natural gas have a lion's share. They are one of the biggest exports of Russia. Apart from this, Russia is a big exporter of arms and armaments. रशिया एक बहुत बड़ा हथियारों का सौदागर है. वो बहुत ही अच्छे हथियार बनाता है और उन्हें अंतर्राष्ट्रीय बाजार में बेचता है. So Russia is a big player in arms and armaments. Then it is also a big country in terms of agricultural exports. It is a major exporter of wheat, potato, some of the other products and oil seeds. So apart from this, there is one more area where Russia is important, and that is commodities, metals and coal. So Russia exports all of this. Now, the war is not in the Russian terrain, so Russian production is not much disrupted. But because of the trade sanctions on Russia and increasing boycott of Russia now in Europe and other areas, there will be impact on the global economy and supply chain. And when it comes to the Ukraine is one of the biggest exporter of wheat. In fact, the second biggest exporter after Russia. It is also a big exporter of sunflower oil and other oil seeds. And there are many other agricultural products as well which Ukraine export. Then Ukraine is also a former Soviet state, and some of the big military industrial complex of Soviet era is also inherited by Ukraine. And some of it, in fact, was located in the now disputed Donbas region. So Russia was also a sizable exporter of arms and armaments. In fact, Pakistan has been a big beneficiary of the Ukrainian arm export. So these are some of the major exports from Ukraine. If these are disrupted, which they will be, what would be the impact on the global market? If we want to analyze the impact on the global market, then the impact is as follows. The wheat prices will rise in the international market because both of these countries are the two biggest wheat exporters. There will be shortage of wheat immediately, and the wheat prices are likely to increase. Then, because of sanctions on Russia, oil prices are likely to increase, and that is a big risk. Now, already Russia is working under sanctions, and a bulk of Russian supply is already to countries like China. So, obviously, China is not going to stop its imports. In fact, China is likely to increase its imports, so all of it is not going to stop. So in fact, the fears regarding the oil prices are also not too big. They are far more exaggerated than what they actually are at present. Yes, if this war goes on very long, If it becomes complicated, then there can be much bigger risk. But it is expected that if this war continues for little more time, then by the end of March, perhaps crude could be $110 per barrel. But if you look at the last 1 week in which war have started, then there is not much of impact on the gold or oil prices. So this is a threat, but not yet materialized. Then another impact would be that edible oil prices may also increase. So this was so far strictly about trade. But the impact will not only be confined to the trade, impact will be in broader area. A war, wherever it is involved, creates uncertainty. It creates fear, it increases risk. And because of these factors, the global investment flow, the global trade flow disrupts. Even if Russia is not involved in that trade, still the entire supply chain gets disrupted. And it is not just the trade, it is also investment. Investment in fact gets affected in a bigger way. Investment always flourishes when there is stable environment, and investment always suffers when there is uncertainty. So investment is also likely to suffer. So these are the impact on the global economy that we expect. Now from here we come to the Indian economy. That what would be the exact impact on the Indian economy. So भारतीय अर्थव्यवस्था की तरफ हम आते हैं. वैसे एक बात मैं कहना चाहूँगा कि ये वीडियो पूरी तरह से इंग्लिश में है और इसका एक हिंदी वर्जन या इसका एक बाइलिंगुअल जो कि अधिकतम हिंदी में और कुछ शब्द इंग्लिश में होगा मैं करने वाला हूं. सो अगर आप हिंदी में इस वीडियो को देखना चाहते हैं तो मेरे दूसरे वीडियो की वेट कीजिए या उसके लिए चेक कीजिए. और ऐसा ही मैं आने वाले तकरीबन सभी वीडियोस के लिए करूंगा जो जनरल इंटरेस्ट में है, जहां मैं पहले वीडियो को इंग्लिश में करूंगा और उसके बाद साथ साथ में उस वीडियो को हिंदी में भी अपलोड करूंगा ताकि हर प्रकार के विद्यार्थी, हर प्रकार के श्रोता मेरी बात को समझ सकें और इसका लाभ ले सकें. तो वापस अब हम आते हैं भारतीय अर्थव्यवस्था की ओर. सो लेट अस गेट बैक टू द इंडियन इकोनॉमी. व्हाट वुड बी द इम्पैक्ट ऑन द इंडियन इकोनॉमी? So first of all, when we talk about the oil prices, this is one of the Achilles heel of India. This is one of the weakest link of India. Whenever there is war in the world, first we look, is it an oil exporting country? The country which is involved in war, if it is oil exporting country, then India is always worried because we import almost all our crude requirement. And because of that, whenever there is disruption in the global crude oil flow, India is affected. But luckily now India has created a big stockpile of oil. Now in the last 2-3 years when oil prices were rock bottom, India created a big supply stock for itself. And in such situations, war-like uncertainty situation, this stockpile can be very useful. So as per one estimate, it is more than 1 year. So in such a situation, first of all, when we say the global oil supply is not likely to disrupt by more than 5%, then global oil prices are not likely to increase by more than 15%, 20%, unless we have a very big and bad war. Then impact on India is also not going to be too big. Okay, so we should not worry too much about the war at present. But we should watch out that it should not become very complicated, it should not involve more countries, or it should not become more bloody in future. Then it would be a cause of concern. So getting back to the point, oil prices increase will have impact on Indian economy for sure. It has an impact on the inflation immediately because then transportation charge increase and every product becomes expensive. Okay. It also increases our current account deficit because we have to pay more for our imports. So this is obvious. The trade deficit is one of the biggest component of the current account deficit. And then in lesser likelihood, with less probability, fiscal deficit can also increase. So that is also a point where India has a risk. Okay, and that is only when oil prices will increase. So oil price increase will affect India macroeconomically. It will affect our stability. Then another risk factor for India is that the edible oil prices, particularly sunflower oil prices, may increase, and this can be a cause of concern, but not that big as much as oil. But now I will discuss the biggest impacts on India. Biggest impact on India is not in the form of imports, not in the form of import security, it is in the form of the broader business activity. As I've said, whenever there is war, it affects the global trade flow. So Indian exports are likely to be affected. Even though we do not export much to Russia and Ukraine, but this war will have an impact on Germany also. This war will have an impact on France. This war will have impact on entire world, particularly Europe. So our European exports may get affected. So that is where we have big risk. Okay, and not just European exports, in general, export or import flow will be disrupted. That affects everything here. Then another big impact that we may see is foreign investment. India is a sizable recipient. India is a big recipient of the foreign investments, whether it is investment in the stock market in the form of portfolio investment, or it is an investment in our industry in the form of direct investment. Both type of investment is quite sizable in India, and because of uncertainty, investment is the first thing that is casualty, that is getting affected. So the big risk for India is investment. The foreign investment which will decline, and also it will have an impact on the domestic environment. Now let me simplify this a bit here. Why do someone invest? कोई invest क्यों करता है? Why? Someone invests because they see more opportunity in future. They see that business will rise, and in order to meet the requirement of the rising business, you must increase your output. That is why they open more factories, they open more companies, they increase production, and that is what we call investment in our economics. So investment is always subject to people's confidence and people's expectation. When they are very hopeful about future, when they expect business to increase in future, then people invest. However, because of war, there is sizable or there is significant uncertainty, and because of that uncertainty and risk, investments, whether foreign or domestic, that would get affected, and ultimately this will affect India's growth. India, which has been struggling for growth for last 3 years because of various reasons, had a very good comeback, had a very good recovery. We had a very sharp V-shaped recovery from COVID induced slowdown. Now, unfortunately, as soon as we have come out of the COVID crisis, now there is this war. And if India's growth get affected because of this war, that would be very unfortunate for India, because we had a good momentum, and this momentum could be halted. And now the last point, from common public or common people's point of view, what will be the impact on common people? So first of all, there can be, I'm not saying there will be, but there can be some inflation. There can be increase in oil prices. This is one point. And secondly, the biggest impact on common public is the impact on the stock markets and other capital markets. Now, since the size of retail investor in our stock market is increasing, more and more common people are now investing in stock markets. They are part of the stock market. As a result, what happens to stock market not only affects the rich and the powerful, it affects common people. And stock market definitely is one of the biggest affected sector or area of the war. So people who have invested, or people who have put their money in stock markets, put their money in bitcoins, gold, and let us say currency futures and all such kind of markets, commodity markets, they will face a lot of fluctuations, and there may be losses in that context. So these are the various type of risk for the Indian economy and Indian people. And this is where I would like to end this discussion. Thank you.